Tom Reynolds stared at his phone screen, reading the message for the 7th time. The words hadn't changed. I had a nice time, but I don't think we're a good match. Good luck with everything. He placed the phone face down on his desk, next to the half-packed box of research equipment. 7 rejections in 2 months. It had to be some kind of record. The dim glow of his office's artificial lighting reflected off the framed doctorate in xenobiology hanging on the wall, a reminder that at least he was good at something. Dr. Reynolds. A voice called from the doorway. The transport ship leaves in 3 hours. Are you finished packing the sensitive equipment? Tom looked up to see his research assistant, Mike, standing there with a clipboard. Almost done, he replied, quickly wiping his eyes. The bacterial samples are already in cryo storage. Mike stepped into the office, his eyes falling on the phone. Another bad date. That obvious, huh? Tom managed a weak smile. You'd think with all my research into alien biology, I'd be better at understanding human behavior. Their loss, Mike said, checking items off his list. Besides, Jupiter Station is the chance of a lifetime. First permanent research post in the outer solar system, studying actual alien microorganisms. Who needs dating when you've got that? Tom nodded, but his heart wasn't in it. At 34, he'd achieved everything he'd ever dreamed of professionally. He'd graduated top of his class, published groundbreaking papers on theoretical alien biology, and now he was headed to humanity's most advanced research station. But he couldn't help feeling that success meant nothing if you had no one to share it with. He picked up the last microscope and carefully placed it in its protective foam casing. The equipment was easier to handle than people. It did what it was supposed to do, followed logical rules, and didn't send confusing messages or expect him to pick up on subtle social cues. You know what Lisa said to me? Tom asked, sealing the box. She said I was too intense when I talked about work, that I needed to learn to make small talk. He shook his head. How is discussing the weather more interesting than talking about how alien bacteria might use Jupiter's radiation for energy? Mike chuckled. Well, most people don't find bacteria as fascinating as you do, but that's what makes you good at your job. A soft beep from the wall panel interrupted them. Attention all Jupiter Station personnel, the automated voice announced. Please ensure all equipment is secured and ready for transport. Shipboarding begins in 2 hours. Tom looked around his office one last time. 10 years of research, papers, and discoveries, all packed away in boxes. The walls were bare except for a single photo of Earth taken from orbit, a reminder of what he was leaving behind. Maybe it's better this way, he said, picking up the heaviest box. 5 years on Jupiter Station means no more awkward dates, no more trying to figure out why people think I'm strange, no more pretending to be someone I'm not. As they walked through the corridors of the Earth Science Center, other researchers and staff members nodded goodbye. Tom had earned their respect through his work, even if he'd never quite managed to fit into their social circles. The loading bay was busy with activity as crews prepared for the long journey to Jupiter. Through the massive windows, Tom could see the transport ship waiting on the launch pad, its sleek form gleaming in the morning sun. Fresh start, Mike said, helping him load the last box onto a cargo trolley. Who knows? Maybe you'll find someone out there who appreciates your kind of intensity. Tom laughed. Right, because dating options are so plentiful on a research station orbiting Jupiter. Little did he know that somewhere in the vast expanse of space, destiny had already set things in motion. Sometimes the heart finds its match in the most unexpected places, even if that place happens to be 365 million miles from Earth. 3 weeks into his stay on Jupiter Station, Tom was already in love, not with a person, but with the view. Through the reinforced windows of his lab, Jupiter's swirling storms created an ever-changing canvas of oranges and reds. Even now, as he carefully adjusted his microscope, he found himself glancing up every few minutes to watch the planet's mesmerizing dance. The lab door swooshed open with a soft hiss. Dr. Reynolds, your new samples have arrived from Section C, a voice called out. Tom turned, expecting to see one of the human lab assistants. Instead, he found himself face to face with a Centaurian. Her skin was a soft shade of blue that seemed to shimmer under the lab lights, and her large, silver eyes held an intelligence that immediately caught his attention. "Oh, you must be the new xenobiologist from Alpha Centauri," Tom said, trying to remember the proper greeting protocol for Centaurians. Should he bow? Wave? Before he could decide, she spoke. "I am Lyra," she said, her voice carrying a slight musical quality that all Centaurians shared. "Your paper on theoretical adaptation methods of silicon-based life forms was fascinating, particularly your hypothesis about radiation resistance." Tom blinked in surprise. Most people's eyes glazed over when he mentioned his research. "You've read my work." "3 times, Lyra replied, setting down the sample container. "Your methodology was exceptionally logical, though I believe you missed a potential variable in the crystalline structure formation." For the next hour, they lost themselves in discussion. Tom found himself relaxing as they talked, noticing how Lyra's direct communication style made everything easier. She didn't use confusing idioms or expect him to guess what she was thinking. When she disagreed with his theories, she simply said so and explained why. "Would you like to see what I'm working on now?" Tom asked, gesturing to his microscope. "It's a new strain of bacteria we found in Europa's ice samples. They seem to use Jupiter's radiation for energy, just like I predicted in my paper." Lyra moved closer, her silver eyes bright with interest. "Show me." As Tom adjusted the microscope's settings, he couldn't help but notice how different this interaction felt from his awkward dates back on Earth. There was no pressure to make small talk or pretend to be interested in things he didn't care about. Just pure scientific curiosity and honest discussion. "Look at how the cellular membrane reacts to the radiation pulses," he said, stepping aside to let her see. Lyra bent over the microscope, her blue fingers gracefully adjusting the focus. "Remarkable. The energy absorption pattern is unlike anything in our databases." "I know." Tom's excitement bubbled over. "And watch what happens when I increase the radiation levels." They spent the next few hours running tests together, building theories, and challenging each other's assumptions. Tom found himself smiling more than he had in months. When Lyra suggested they could combine their research projects, his heart did a little jump he couldn't quite explain. "Your enthusiasm for discovery is admirable," Lyra said as they finished documenting their results. "Many humans I've met seem to hide their intellectual passion, as if it's something to be ashamed of." Tom's smile faded slightly. "Yeah, I've been told I get too excited about my work. That it makes people uncomfortable. Curious." Lyra tilted her head. "On Centauri, such passion is considered highly attractive. We believe that true connection comes from shared intellectual curiosity, not superficial social rituals." As if on cue, Jupiter's light caught her blue skin, creating patterns that reminded Tom of the bacterial cultures they'd been studying. He realized he'd been staring and quickly looked away. "Same time tomorrow?" he asked, trying to sound casual. "We could start mapping the bacteria's radiation response patterns." "I would enjoy that very much," Lyra replied with a slight bow, the Centaurian gesture of respect between equals. As she left the lab, Tom turned back to the window. Jupiter's storms seemed a bit brighter somehow, and for the first time since arriving at the station, he felt truly hopeful about what tomorrow might bring. The station's observation deck was empty except for Tom and Lyra, sitting cross-legged on the floor with their backs against the curved window. Behind them, Jupiter's great red spot cast a warm glow through the reinforced glass, making Lyra's blue skin look almost purple. "So on Earth," Tom said, unwrapping his sandwich, "people often spend their first dates at restaurants or watching entertainment videos. They usually avoid talking about work or serious topics." Lyra's silver eyes widened slightly. "How do they determine intellectual compatibility?" "They don't, really. It's more about feeling comfortable together, making each other laugh, that kind of thing." Tom took a bite of his sandwich, remembering his failed dates back home. "Fascinating." Lyra opened her own meal container, filled with glowing blue Centaurian fruit. On my world, potential partners first exchange research papers or technical projects. Physical appearance is considered a minor factor compared to the strength of one's theories and ideas. Tom nearly choked on his sandwich. Really? That sounds amazing, actually. No wonder you didn't think I was weird when I spent our first meeting talking about bacteria. Weird. Lyra tested the unfamiliar word. No, your passion for discovery is exactly what we value. Though I must admit, human emotional expressions are still confusing to me. Like that thing you do with your mouth when you're pleased. You mean smiling. Tom demonstrated, and Lyra watched with scientific interest. Yes, that. On Centauri, we show happiness through subtle color changes in our skin. See? The blue of her cheeks rippled slightly, taking on a brighter hue. Tom leaned closer, fascinated. That's beautiful. Like bioluminescence in deep-sea creatures on Earth. They spent the next hour exchanging stories about their worlds. Tom learned that Centaurian children were taught advanced mathematics before learning to walk, and that they considered Earth's practice of small talk to be charmingly primitive. In return, he explained human concepts like dancing, sports, and romance movies. I still don't understand, Lyra said. Why would humans move their bodies in synchronized patterns to show attraction? Well, when you put it that way, it does sound kind of silly, Tom laughed. But dancing can be nice. It's about feeling connected to someone without words. Lyra was quiet for a moment, watching Jupiter's storms swirl behind them. Perhaps that's not so different from our way. We also seek connection. We just find it through sharing knowledge rather than physical movement. You know, Tom said softly, I never felt connected to anyone on Earth. Not really. They always wanted me to be different, to care about things I didn't understand. Different is not bad, Lyra replied, her skin shifting to a deeper blue. On my world, we have a saying. The universe's greatest discoveries come from minds that see what others cannot. Tom felt something warm spread through his chest. For the first time in his life, being different didn't feel like a flaw. Here, millions of miles from Earth, he'd found someone who saw his intensity as a gift rather than a problem. Would you? He hesitated, then gathered his courage. Would you like to read my latest research paper? The one about possible communications methods of silicon-based life forms. Lyra's skin brightened noticeably. I would be honored. And perhaps you would be interested in reviewing my study on radiation-resistant protein structures. I'd love to, Tom replied, realizing this was probably the Centaurian equivalent of asking someone out on a date. As they gathered their things to head back to the lab, Tom caught his reflection in the window. He was smiling again, but for once, he didn't feel self-conscious about it. Maybe love didn't have to look like it did in Earth movies. Maybe it could look like this. Two people from different worlds, finding connection in the joy of discovery. He glanced at Lyra, her blue skin still glowing with happiness, and thought that perhaps getting rejected back on Earth was the best thing that could have happened to him. The station's cafeteria buzzed with the usual lunchtime chatter. Tom sat at his usual corner table, reviewing Lyra's research paper on his tablet while eating. He was so absorbed in her fascinating theories about protein structures that he didn't notice the two human scientists approaching until they sat down across from him. So, said Dave from engineering, you and the Centaurian, huh? Tom looked up, suddenly uncomfortable. What do you mean? Come on, Lisa from medical chimed in, stirring her coffee. Everyone's talking about it. You two spend every day together in that lab. And yesterday, you were seen on the observation deck sharing lunch. We're collaborating on research, Tom said defensively, though he could feel his face getting warm. She has some brilliant theories about radiation-resistant life forms. Dave and Lisa exchanged knowing looks. Sure, research, Dave smirked. Just like how Jack from maintenance is researching anti-gravity with that Martian engineer. It's different, Tom insisted, But even as he said it, he wasn't sure why he was defending himself. Was there something more to his feelings for Lyra? Across the cafeteria, a group of Centaurian scientists sat together, their blue skin creating a striking contrast against the station's white walls. Tom noticed them glancing his way occasionally, their skin shifting through various shades, their way of communicating privately. Later that day, as Tom worked in the lab, he overheard two Centaurian researchers talking outside the door. Their collaboration is highly logical, one said in their musical language, which Tom had been learning. His theoretical models complement her practical applications perfectly. True, the other replied, their skin rippling with interest. But some worry about the emotional complications. Humans are known for their unpredictable feelings. Tom pretended to focus on his microscope, but their words echoed in his mind. Were his feelings for Lyra unpredictable? He didn't think so. Everything about their connection felt natural, logical even, unlike his awkward attempts at dating on Earth. The lab door opened, and Lyra entered. Her skin brightened slightly when she saw him, her equivalent of a smile. The other researchers have been asking about our work together, she said, setting up her equipment beside his. Yeah, same here, Tom replied, adjusting his microscope. The humans seem to think, well, that it's more than just research. Lyra's skin shifted to a deeper blue, her species' sign of deep thought. Does that bother you? Tom considered the question carefully. No, he finally said. What bothers me is how they make it sound strange or wrong somehow, like we don't make sense together. By whose standards? Lyra asked, her direct Centaurian logic cutting through his worry. Earth's, Centauri's. The universe is vast, Tom. Perhaps we make our own sense. Her words made him smile. She was right. Why should they care about fitting anyone else's definition of normal? Just then, the station's daily newsfeed flashed on the lab's display screen. There, among the usual announcements about maintenance schedules and safety protocols, was a new policy notice. Interspecies Collaboration Guidelines Update. All research partnerships to be registered with station administration. They made new rules because of us, Tom said, feeling a mix of embarrassment and pride. Lyra read the notice, her skin flickering with amusement. Humans do love their rules. Shall we go register our research partnership? The way she said it made Tom laugh. Maybe the gossip wasn't such a bad thing after all. It had made them confront their feelings instead of hiding behind scientific terminology. As they walked to the administration office together, Tom noticed people watching them, humans and aliens alike. But for the first time in his life, being the center of attention didn't make him uncomfortable, because now he wasn't alone in being different. He had someone who understood him, someone who saw the world the same way he did, even if that someone happened to have blue skin and came from another star system. The first warning came at 3 a.m. station time. Tom was working late in the lab, analyzing data with Lyra, when the emergency lights began flashing red. Warning: environmental system malfunction detected in Biodiversity Lab Section C, the station's AI announced. Temperature rising beyond acceptable parameters. Tom's heart jumped into his throat. Section C contained their most sensitive experiments, including the radiation-resistant bacteria they'd been studying for months. If those samples overheat, he started, they'll mutate uncontrollably, Lyra finished, her skin paling to a lighter blue with concern. We need to act now. They raced through the station's corridors, their footsteps echoing off the metal walls. Other scientists were emerging from their labs, looking confused and worried. The station's night shift crew was already heading toward the environmental control room. When they reached Section C, the situation was worse than they'd feared. Through the reinforced window, they could see the temperature displays climbing rapidly. The cooling system had completely failed, and the backup wasn't responding. The radiation shields are affecting the backup cooling system, one of the engineers explained, frantically typing at a control panel. We can't bypass it without compromising the entire section's radiation protection. If we lose those samples, we lose 6 months of research, another scientist said. Not to mention the risk of contamination if any of the specimens survive and mutate. Tom looked at Lyra, and in that moment, something clicked between them. Her silver eyes met his, and he knew they were thinking the same thing. The bacteria, they said simultaneously. What about the bacteria? The engineer asked. Our radiation-resistant bacteria, Tom explained quickly. They don't just survive radiation. They'd process it, convert it to other forms of energy. Lyra's skin brightened with excitement. If we could introduce a controlled amount into the cooling system, they could absorb the excess radiation, Tom continued, allowing the backup cooling to function. The other scientists looked skeptical. That's crazy, one of them said. Using bacteria to fix a mechanical problem. Sometimes crazy is logical, Lyra responded, her skin rippling with determination. Tom, help me prepare the samples. They worked together seamlessly, Tom's careful precision complementing Lyra's quick calculations. While the other scientists argued about proper procedures, they prepared a stable solution of their bacteria. This goes against every safety protocol, the station's safety officer protested. With all due respect, Tom said, surprised by his own confidence, following standard protocols will result in losing everything. Sometimes you need to think differently. Lyra nodded, her skin glowing with pride at his words. They introduced their bacterial solution into the cooling system, watching anxiously as the temperature readings continued to climb. For 30 seconds, nothing happened. The warning lights kept flashing, and Tom could hear his heart pounding in his ears. Then, slowly, the temperature began to drop. It's working, someone shouted. The bacteria were doing their job, absorbing the excess radiation and clearing the way for the backup cooling system to function. Within minutes, the crisis was over. As the emergency lights faded and the regular lighting resumed, Tom and Lyra stood together, watching their bacteria save millions of dollars worth of research. Their hands found each other's, his warm human fingers intertwining with her cool blue ones. We did it, Tom whispered. No, Lyra corrected him, her skin glowing with the brightest shade of blue he'd ever seen. We did it together. Your human creativity combined with Centaurian logic. It's a force stronger than either alone. Looking at their joined hands, Tom realized she wasn't just talking about solving the crisis. Their relationship itself was like their solution to the emergency. Unexpected, unconventional, but perfectly logical in its own way. The station's chief scientist approached them, looking both impressed and slightly embarrassed. I owe you both an apology, he said. We've been so focused on traditional solutions, we failed to see the value of your unique partnership. Tom squeezed Lyra's hand gently, feeling her skin shimmer in response. Sometimes, he thought, the best discoveries happen when you stop trying to follow the rules and just let your heart lead the way, even if that way seems strange to everyone else. Word of Tom and Lyra's success in saving the biodiversity lab spread quickly through Jupiter Station, but along with the praise came increased attention, and not all of it was positive. One morning, Tom arrived at the lab to find Lyra already there, her skin a darker shade of blue than usual, a sign of distress among her people. She was reading a message on her tablet. What's wrong? He asked, setting down his coffee. The Centaurian Science Council sent a message, she said quietly. They're concerned about our relationship. They say it could compromise the objectivity of our research. Tom felt his stomach tighten. Earth's Space Administration sent me something similar yesterday. They want me to transfer to a different research team. Because of me. Lyra's skin rippled with waves of darker blue. Because they don't understand, Tom corrected, moving closer to her. They see our differences as problems instead of strengths. The lab door opened, and Dr. Wilson, the station's head of research, entered. His expression was serious. Tom, Lyra, we need to talk about your situation. They sat down at the lab bench, the morning light from Jupiter casting long shadows across the room. Dr. Wilson cleared his throat uncomfortably. "Look," he began, "your work is outstanding. The way you handled the crisis proved that. But there are concerns about the nature of your relationship. Some people worry it could affect station dynamics." "With all respect, Dr. Wilson," Tom said, finding courage he didn't know he had, "how does our relationship different from human couples who work together on the station, or other interspecies research partnerships?" "It's not just about work," Dr. Wilson replied. "The medical team has raised questions about biological compatibility, and the Cultural Exchange Office is worried about diplomatic implications." Lyra's skin flickered with subtle patterns, her way of showing frustration. "On Centauri, we judge relationships by their outcomes. Tom and I have proven our compatibility through our work. Is that not more important than biological matching?" "She's right," Tom added. "Everyone was happy to accept our differences when they were saving the station's research. Why are those same differences a problem now?" Dr. Wilson looked between them, then sighed. "You make a fair point, but you have to understand, this is unprecedented. There's no protocol for this kind of situation." "Then maybe it's time to write new protocols," Tom suggested. He reached for Lyra's hand, watching as her blue skin brightened at his touch. "The whole point of this station is to study new possibilities, isn't it? To explore the unknown. You want us to pretend this connection doesn't exist?" Lyra asked, her musical voice carrying a hint of challenge. "To deny something that has already proven beneficial to everyone here." Dr. Wilson was quiet for a long moment, looking out at Jupiter's swirling storms. Finally, he turned back to them. "No, I don't think we can deny it, or should, but you need to understand, you'll be facing a lot of questions from both your worlds." "We're scientists," Tom said, smiling slightly. "Questions don't scare us." "Besides," Lyra added, her skin glowing with determination, "is not love itself a form of scientific discovery? Finding patterns that others miss, forming connections that seem impossible at first." Dr. Wilson actually laughed at that. "When you put it that way, all right, I'll support you. But be prepared. Not everyone will understand." As he left the lab, Tom and Lyra looked at each other. The challenges ahead were significant, but they'd faced difficulties before. Their different perspectives, which everyone else saw as a problem, had already helped them solve supposedly impossible problems. "They'll understand eventually," Tom said softly. Lyra's skin shimmered with hope. "Yes, and until then, we'll keep proving that love, like science, knows no boundaries." Outside their window, Jupiter's eternal storms continued their dance, a reminder that the most beautiful things in the universe often came from chaos and unlikely combinations. 6 months after the crisis in the biodiversity lab, Jupiter Station had changed in ways nobody expected. The observation deck, once a quiet spot for solitary stargazing, now hosted weekly cultural exchange evenings where humans and aliens shared stories, customs, and ideas. Tom stood at the front of the deck, trying to keep his nerves under control as he faced the gathered crowd. Beside him, Lyra's skin glowed with a calm, steady blue that helped settle his anxiety. "1 year ago," he began, "I came to this station thinking I didn't fit in anywhere. That being different was a flaw." He smiled at Lyra. "I was wrong." The audience, a mix of humans and various alien species, watched with interest. Among them sat representatives from both Earth's Space Administration and the Centaurian Science Council, who had come to evaluate the station's new interspecies cooperation protocols. "Our research team's latest breakthrough in radiation-resistant biotechnology wasn't just about combining human and Centaurian science," Tom continued. "It was about understanding that our differences make us stronger." Lyra stepped forward, her skin shimmering with pride. "The bacteria we studied taught us something important," she added, her musical voice carrying clearly through the room. "Life finds ways to adapt, to thrive in unexpected conditions. Perhaps we should learn from it." They presented their findings, not just about the bacteria, but about the success of their other collaborative projects. The statistics were clear. Research teams that combined different species and approaches had a 40% higher success rate in solving complex problems. Dr. Wilson stood up from his seat in the front row. When Tom and Lyra first started working together, many of us were skeptical. We worried about compatibility, about maintaining proper scientific distance. He chuckled. We were looking at it all wrong. Their connection didn't compromise their work. It enhanced it. The Earth representative, a serious woman named Dr. Martinez, spoke next. The Space Administration has reviewed your results. We're not just approving your partnership. We're using it as a model for future interspecies collaboration protocols. The Centaurian representative's skin flickered with approval, their equivalent of applause. The Science Council agrees. Your work proves that true compatibility transcends biological differences. After the presentation, Tom and Lyra stood by their favorite window, watching Jupiter's storms swirl below. The station's lights had dimmed for the night cycle, leaving them in the gentle glow of the planet's reflected light. Remember when you first arrived? Tom asked. I was so worried about saying the wrong thing, about being too intense about my work. Lyra's skin rippled with amusement, and I was trying to understand why humans hide their passion behind what you call small talk. Now look at us. Tom gestured to the certificate they'd received, officially recognizing their research partnership and relationship, the first of its kind. We're making history. More important than history, Lyra said softly, her skin glowing with the deep blue shade that Tom now knew meant love. We're making progress, showing others that connection doesn't have to follow traditional paths. The station's night lights created beautiful patterns on her blue skin, and Tom was struck again by how perfectly they complemented each other. His human warmth and her Centaurian cool, his theoretical approach and her practical solutions, his emotional depth and her logical clarity. Together, they made something entirely new and wonderful. I was turned down so many times on Earth, Tom mused, because I didn't fit their idea of normal. But you know what? I'm glad I didn't change who I was. Because it led you here? Lyra asked, her silver eyes twinkling. Because it led me to you, he replied, taking her hand. Her skin brightened at his touch, sending waves of blue light dancing across their joined fingers. Outside their window, Jupiter's eternal storms continued their cosmic dance, a reminder that the universe's greatest wonders often came from the mixing of different forces. And in their own small way, Tom and Lyra were proof that love, like the cosmos itself, had infinite possibilities, if only you were brave enough to explore them.